Morning folks, a longer video, and the reason I don't have a top on, I live in a hot climate. It's not to show anything off. I don't think I've got anything to show off. Just look here and listen here and you'll be fine. So yesterday I talked about a number of things. Firstly, the road is narrow, that within the awakening movement generally people are replacing one set of beliefs with more fantastical beliefs, and even though there seems to be substance in a lot of the stuff that resonates with me about ancient history, about the recycling trap, there's so many things, you name it, and I can have a view, and also there's a particular resonance about that. The goal for man and woman is essentially to enter a pathway of Gnosis. That's where you develop yourself sufficiently so that things can be revealed to you, so that when you enter the kingdom of heaven, it is the universal and the one designed for the children of the divine parent. The problem is a lot of people's kingdoms is their own subjective kingdoms. Often people have unconscious trauma that kind of misdirects and distorts their spiritual aims. It causes a certain amount of self-dishonesty. This video is going to be a little bit longer than a couple of minutes, so I'll warn you now. So yeah, that's the first thing, and I talked about how my channel will never blow up because I challenge people and I call them to this Gnosis process where things will be revealed to you, not in a random sort of way, but in a very universal way in which the divine parent leads you according to your development along the path, until the point you reach a very protected state, which is the true awakening state, where you fall under a new cosmic jurisdiction. And that is when one is well and truly crossed the river. And I actually check my feeds. I check my feeds to see what I can learn from others. And it's all, I wouldn't say it's clickbait, but it's all, and I get it's Instagram. And this is why I do my long videos on here, because I don't care. I don't care how long my videos, because when someone's really seeking the truth, man, they love to hear it. But I'm struggling to find content that I can add to my stories because it's all fantastical. Click, click, you know, as if waking up is going to be done by these little clicks, you know. And it's, again, I've talked about belief systems and how they're for children until you've sufficiently developed and you experience Gnosis. And again, well, I've covered that already. So what I talked about yesterday is that in the awakening movement, man, look, it's all over the place. I have little regard for most of it. You know, the path is really, really, really bloody narrow. I will say, though, that I agree with certain references to the Bible. I think that there are those on this planet that are of the vine, that belong to the divine parent. And it is, even though some people might not make it in this cycle, ultimately they're destined to return home, and the shit show will continue until they do make it home, so to speak. But having said that, I think that the awakening movement is generally it's filled with people that are gatekeepers, that they ain't going there. And you know, these people have wisdom, these people have tricks or miracles or senses, but so what? You know, check out black magic. That's extremely powerful stuff. And what I'm saying is that unless you're authentic, unless you're really on a genuine path, you're generally in some sort of trade agreement. In other words, you've allied yourself with an entity or a certain form in which you're given tricks. Meanwhile, you're loose, your psychic energy is getting harvested, and it's a trade. And it generally happens when people have a will to power rather than a will to truth. And the will to truth is something entirely different. So yeah, and that's why even in the Bible, this idea of a guy doing miracles, what a load of bullshit. And I tell you, even in this present day, some dude down the road doing miracles, I would be extremely weary. I wouldn't suddenly go, oh, he must be of God. Well, if he is, which one? You know, miracles are not any sign at all. And the fact the Bible goes on and on about it just goes to show that it's been heavily meddled with. There are some truths in there, but it is a real mixture of honey and poison. So what I also talked about, to be fair, and it actually comes from Moraviev's work, and he does the Gnosis Book 1, 2, and 3. And one thing he talks about is very much this one way, yes, one way to awakening. But he also allows for what he calls the saints. And the saints are those who've incarnated that don't need to do this work. The tragedy is amongst this awakening movements, no one's really doing the work. No one, but not many. But he allows for the saints, those who are incarnated. If we were to have a chat about Gnosticism and Gnosis, and it probably wouldn't connect. However, they've been placed here. I won't go into names. It's not for me to say who and who hasn't, but I definitely allow for that. And I know a number of individuals that I got nothing to say, because I see it'd be very specific, and mine may be very different to yours. I'll say that. But what I also need to talk about as well, again referenced in Gnosis, I describe it, and this is me paraphrasing, and that is the balance of power. So firstly, I say that this experience we're having is under tight lockdown. There are rulers and a rule and a principle that governs and rules outright. No questions, no if, no matter who rotates in leaderships, this experience has one ruler. And it is the ruler we need to overcome. And I'm not talking about the externalities, even though we need to meet and deal with those sorts of things. I'm talking in a non-physical sense. So essentially you have a ruler here, and it ain't the divine parent, I'll tell you that. However, the divine parent works on a certain set of principles. I don't know what the right word is, but whilst you've got a ruler and a ruling principle of this world, it is still within a sort of substance, not the right word, but within a medium that the divine parent can act according to our own development, I should speak, but also can act in a more universal, could we say global or matrix sense. Now, what the balance of power has to do with, and this is referencing from some of the stories of Moraviev, is the balance of power is that there can be individuals that don't know God, or know God in a very external, basic way, a bit like the saints, but not necessarily the saints. They can cause actions, movements, eras, historical changes, and essentially, and this is my words, and look, I have to say this is not absolute, but it is an idea that resonates with me. I like to make that distinction because I do make a number of statements that are very absolute, and you'll be pretty sure when I'm making those statements, whereas this is more of a resonating idea. And the idea essentially, I am absolute about the ruling principle, no ifs, no buts, but as far as this balance of power, it's just an intriguing idea that resonates. Anyway, back to the idea. So what you can have is individuals that may not know or be on this path, but somehow or another they make, and essentially what history seems to be is, despite the ups and downs of fascism and freedom, and then you've got, kings getting naughty, and then you've got the Magna Carta where the barons come in and say, hey, sign this bloody treaty. If you look at the original relationship and contract with the Queen, I'm not opposed to having a king or queen if the original contract was in place. And what that means is you can lead, but as long as you protect my rights. The moment you don't, the contract is null and void. But we have a legal system and an admiral law system, civil law, that's tricked us into thinking that's no longer valid. And if you try to challenge it, you'll find that those that are legalese will commit violence against you. Anyway, I drift. What I'm trying to say is that I wonder whether the balance of power has to do with keeping a modicum of free will on this planet. So despite the shit show that gets worse and maybe sometimes feels better, but right now we're right in the middle of some heavy stuff. However, for the man or woman who truly seeks with all their heart to return home, those who belong to the divine parent, because not everyone here does, the shit show's allowed. And there can be certain movements, even with individuals that are not inspired, that can be almost led or misled into creating the conditions that the family of the divine parent can still, if they so seek. And Moraviev mentions past people in history, but I would say even now, I think it's a very interesting idea that resonates me. And furthermore, it also gives me a lot of hope too, because I dare say that free will is very underestimated, and it's kind of like the I don't know, the chessboard itself of the chess game, that without free will there is no game. There is no matrix without the free will. Now, free will, you have different levels of free will. Let's imagine that free will is part of creation, even on higher levels of beings. And that would mean that, you know, things like angels, so to speak, etc., could also choose to love their creator or not. It could explain a lot of things. But let's get to us and our free will. I've already talked about the truth that most people have an imagined free will because they do not understand, and they certainly haven't overcome the forces that influence and govern them. They are essentially possessed while claiming to have a free will, but it is completely imagined. But what gives me hope is the transhumanist future that's being pushed upon us. And the reason it gives me, because, you know, you can read anything, there's big panic, big fear, big scare. It don't bother me, because what are they trying to do? They're trying to remove the chessboard. Because if you move into a brain-mind computer interface, and you've got a virtual reality that is telling you you've got all your options, you're moving into a state, it's like going, we're already in a trap in reality, and yet if we seek with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength, we can find our way home. But in a virtual reality, in transhumanism, that could sort of be, maybe not entirely, but almost entirely removed, and that is a deal breaker. Because there are certain cosmic laws in place, and that's why I don't fear that. But I did want to share about this balance of power, because I've talked about the narrow path. I talk about those that are doing work, that this process and this work, which takes all of a man, it is the hardest thing you'll ever achieve in your life, and deservedly so. But I've talked about the saints. I've talked about the needs of what we need to do to cross the threshold, cross the river, return home, be in complete union with the divine parent under the true kingdom of God, not our imagined subjective, hey, you know, my little kingdom with all my bells and whistles. Careful with that stuff, because you'll be loyal to a counterfeit to the point where you will never let go in this incarnation. So maybe it's done. And I guess what I'm adding here is the balance of power, and that is that there may well be events and individuals that don't fit these systems that have to do with free will to some degree. I'm not saying universal, but to some degree remains existent. And it also gives me a lot of hope. And I also wonder whether we may have been at this point. I do not think history is linear for a moment. But I wonder whether things like cataclysms or collapses may have come about when man has stepped too far, or those that appear like men but are doing the work of others, whether things are pushed too far. Because what I'm saying is the free will is the chessboard. There's no game without it. Anyway, I thought I'd share that, and I hope it helps someone.